Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for a virtual medium format meetup from Hasselblad. My name is Emmy, joining you from the New York area. For those of you joining us for the first time today, welcome. Thank you for spending some time with us today. I have the pleasure of speaking to Ellen McDermott. She is a New York City-based photographer, best known for her commercial and advertising work with interior spaces. Her photography evokes emotion, which enhances the digital experience for consumers across e-commerce, marketing, and content creation. The approach involves shooting with a studied and refined lighting that immediately provokes the viewer into a time and space. Today, we'll be focusing on some of Ellen's collection of work and her views on the effects of technology on artistry and her choice of medium format tools. And she was one of our weekly winners from the Hasselblad U contest, so we'll dive into that a little bit. Today's talk will be about 50 minutes, and this will give us some time to end with a Q&A from our listeners. So if you have any questions for our artists, please post them in the question pane in the control panel. And if you miss a part of this webinar today, it will be available on YouTube later this week. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the lovely Ellen McDermott.
Hi, Emmy.
Hi.
So
Welcome.
nice to see you.
Yes, good to see you too. How are you?
All right. Thank you so much for having me. It's quite the privilege.
Oh, it's our pleasure. So we'll just get we'll get started. So where did you first get a start in photography?
Well, I'm from the seacoast of New Hampshire, and there's about 17 miles of coastline, which is not a lot, but it's incredibly beautiful. So it was always visually inspiring throughout my childhood and growing up. It also has a lot of horse farms and barns, which has been much of my subject matter, even up until this day. And so I've always been interested in that visually.
So how did you go from New Hampshire to moving to San Francisco and, ending up in New York City?
Well, first I made a stop in Boston. So I went to school in Boston, and I got a BFA in from Emmanuel College, and with a concentration in photography. I studied drawing, painting, printmaking, sculpture, but my concentration was in photography. I took courses at the museum school as well. And so upon graduation, I actually also shot with a 35 millimeter shot film, black and white, portraiture, figurative, and pushing it towards abstraction. So that's what I did in college. And then I moved to San Francisco, where I worked at one of the top auction houses. And that's when I began shooting. We were shooting film at the time. I was shooting 4x5, 8x10, but a lot of 2 1/4. So that's when I was introduced to all things Hasselblad and immediately fell in love. So we were photographing antiques, fine art, paintings, masters. We were photographing furniture, objects, and all on film. And then I was continuing my personal work still at this time, photographing people, portraits, and figurative, but with the Hasselblad, with a medium format. At this time, in San Francisco, it was one of the first companies within the United States to transition to digital photography. And we were very fortunate to have being trained by the software engineer, which was great because it's a huge leap going from film to digital at the time.
Absolutely.
And it made sense for the company to go digital because it was catalog work. So, you're eliminating film processing and scanning. It's a huge change and very cost effective for catalog work and when you're shooting just a lot of product. So that's what we did. And it was great. The first camera that came out was, we were working with a SciTech software, which is a very sophisticated scanning software. but it was coupled with the Leaf DCB2. They actually lovingly referred to it as the brick because it was like this huge, and you had to be on a very sturdy tripod. It was solely a studio camera. So, and it had a 3-pop system. It would do a pop, an exposure for the red channel, an exposure for the green, and then another exposure for the blue channel. So if you had any movement on the floor, you would get a misregistration. And the SciTech software could re-register it, but you know, occasionally you wouldn't be successful. And also it wasn't for natural daylight. If a cloud went in front of the sun, you would have a color shift in temperature. So it was very much a studio camera. And so I worked on that for about, I'd say 6 years before coming to New York City.
So how was like the whole process working with digital, like compared to back then and now? Has it become much easier, or has it become like more complicated as the technology, you know, advanced?
It's definitely become easier. One of the things I noticed really quickly was as cameras were advancing for more people to use and more accessible, what they did is they kind of hid the software from the photographers so that, because it was very easy for a film photographer to change something accidentally or inadvertently, and if they didn't know the ins and outs of the software, that could be really detrimental to the shoot and to the day. So the software could be somewhat more hidden, and then you could dive in and do more with it. But it definitely it's definitely gotten not only easier, but it feels more like film. Sometimes, you know, you could get it to feel more like film, pushing it in a certain way and using the technology. It's kind of the difference between, for audio, between CDs and, you know, the old turntables. When CDs first came out, just like when first CDs came out, we really heard the difference, and it was almost the sound, it was almost the space in between the notes was too clean. So with digital, it was a really clean and sharp contrast to what everybody had been used to visually with film. But one of the things it did excel in is sharp-edged objects, such as watches, jewelry, glass. So when I came to New York, I started working for Christie's Auction House as well as J. Crew. Those two companies were some of the first in New York City to purchase the equipment. And again, it was still that same DCB2, the Leaf system. And so we you know, I shot a lot for them, and it made sense that having the experience I had, I could come in and really help out, and I didn't need to be trained so much, but I could help with some of the technical issues that would arise and just start shooting. And then I shot a lot of watches for Tourneau. I did a catalog for Rolex, jewelry for David Yurman, and glass for Tiffany and Company. And that was really wonderful. So this is all still with and it was mounted on a 4x5 camera, the Cinar Braun camera, and so this is all still studio work. And then I got into some fun with
so how did you make the transition from, you know, working from San Francisco, moving to New York, from the auction house scene to, you know, the interior photography scene that you do currently?
Okay, so Martha Stewart Living was looking for a digital back that they were going to purchase for their studios, and they got word that I had been doing this for about maybe 8 years so far. So they reached out, and they asked me to try out the digital backs that they were interested in purchasing for their studios. So I was curious to try a new technology, and it actually was the phase 1 that they were interested in. And what was interesting about it was it looked like a regular magazine film back. So my question was, will it work with my beautiful 501c vintage Hasselblad with all the lenses that I'd amassed over the years. And it did. And it was a dream because now I could be mobile and it was a one-shot capture. So I could be on location, and we shot this is an example of the Martha Stewart homekeeping handbook that we shot. This is a beautiful image from up in Maine, and I was able to be portable. So from there, I was able to offer that service to my antiques clients and auction houses, but on location, which was really great. And this is an example of that. This was for Bonhams. And we were in Martha's Vineyard, and this was a collection shot in situ. The client, most of the project was shot again on like a seamless and really about the product. But this looked so beautiful that I was able to convince them to let me shoot it in situ. And they were a little ambivalent at first, but once we did it, we all really enjoyed the process of putting it together, and the results were wonderful. They were thrilled with it, and it made the cover for their catalog.
Oh, wow.
So that's, yeah, that's how that came about. And then I continued shooting for collectors. This was a collector. This is Antiques and Fine Art magazine. So we're shooting still on the 501c with the phase back, which is still to this day I have in my gear kit. But the Hasselblad is my favorite with the lenses, the Carl Zeiss lenses, the sharpness, and I enjoyed looking down into the camera but having that really awesome technology, and I was tethered to a computer for all of this process as well. And the thing that I loved with having the vintage Hasselblad is that I could update the backs, and you can use any type of back. There are a bunch of companies that make different backs for different purposes, and they can go right on the camera. So I wasn't updating like the whole camera, it was just the back that could be updated, and I could use just my familiar lenses throughout the years with the 501c.
And it certainly is a special experience, working with the V system cameras.
Yep. Again, this is more similar Antiques and Fine Art magazine, and these gentlemen had set up their collection in such a beautiful way that it was just, it is what it is. You could see what it is. It's beautiful, weather vanes. That's the other thing about New England, is that I was very much immersed in Americana lifestyle and all those things that go with barns like weather vanes.
Yeah, this is beautiful. We have some comments coming in saying that your work is stunning.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I've had quite some time to practice it, right? Even though I'm still young.
So we'll move on to the next slide here.
So this one was also, this one is also a collection, and this is an amazing architect and antiques dealer team. David Gilmet is the architect, and Pat Bell of Old Hope Antiques is the antiques dealer, and we've become close with them. And we were given this opportunity to shoot in Sag Harbor, this beautiful home that they designed and also provided the collection. And Greg Serio is the editor-in-chief, and he had initially chosen a different image, and I was disappointed because it was a beautiful piece of artwork that he wanted on the cover, but the photo just wasn't what this one was. So when he changed his mind to using this image, we were incredibly excited, and so that is the result.
Yeah. Okay. And then we'll move on to this is a designer, Michael Bastian. Is someone you worked with closely?
Yep. So this was shot for One Kings Lane. and he's an amazing fashion designer. And this is his home in the West Village in New York City with his husband Mike Vassi.
Mhm.
And it was just a wonderful day, an incredible day shooting. And so we did interiors, we did a little lifestyle with them in some of the shots. And yeah, so the work went from a lot of antiques and auction house work. It kind of
Mhm.
segued naturally into working with designers. And I would say coming into shooting interiors was somewhat of a natural progression. It was very organic the way it happened,
Mhm.
because, like I said, I had shot a lot of objects and furniture. So kind of the next step that was interesting, and it made sense, but I didn't really understand it at the time, was it just moved into these objects and furniture in situ, in the environment that they exist in. And I started to
Mhm.
discover that with when I was shooting with Martha Stewart. That was when that first started to occur to me. And I had a rep at the time, Mary Dale, and she also said, you know, you have a whole portfolio of interior work. And that was also a revelation to me as well. And so it's very much been an ongoing passion of mine, is interiors,
Mhm.
interior
So I,
spaces.
oh, very cool. So I just have a quick question from the audience. Peter asks, how did you experience the transition from the 2.25-inch square film to digital backs in terms of the field of view, um, during the film era lenses?
So the first thing that was really noticeable was the kind of super sharpness of it.
Mhm.
The back that I was using was the light phase, and also it was a longer, like an elongated rectangular shape, and
Mhm.
that was a little unsettling because it wasn't the one-to-one. The chip was smaller than what the film would be.
Mhm.
So you did need more wide angle lenses, which also enabled or produced more sharpness.
Mhm.
Um, and so I mean, in getting the imagery to look like, to replicate film more so was more challenging in
Mhm.
the beginning. And because it was sharper, for all those reasons, just being digital, and that the lenses needed to be a little more wide angle so that you could fit into the smaller chip the
Mhm.
imagery that you were shooting. I don't know if this is making any sense, but that's
No.
what I initially uh, was struck by, and that was unsettling. And then I think they came out with like a square format, which more
Mhm.
mimicked the 2.25 by 2.25, which was actually more pleasing for me to use because I had been more used to that with film.
Mhm. Got it. Okay, so we move on to the next slide. And a lot of people are asking, a lot of the listeners are asking about lighting. So could you talk about, do you use natural lighting, off-camera flash? What's your light situation?
Okay, so this is Bryant Keller of Keller and Co. Designs, a designer we've worked with for a number of years. And the lighting, when we shoot interiors, one of the things that I feel is very important is what's happening with the natural light. I have shot for years in the studio, like I said, with strobe and all of that. So we do have our Broncolor, and we have some pro photo that we bring with us to photo shoots if we need to fill in an area that's coming up darker, or if it's a really, really dark day. But we want to use natural light as much as possible. So this is natural light. You could recreate it with artificial light, but it's never going to be natural light. Natural light has a quality that's what designers design a room around, or a space around, or a home. It's what's going on with the natural light. This situation with the natural light is only going to happen this one time, and it will never be replicated again. It may be
Mhm.
similar, but you're never going to have this feeling again. So what we try to do when we're working on set is to kind of follow the natural light. If we can have a walkthrough the day before or whenever before a shoot, it's great, so we can get more of a sense of the space and what the lighting is doing. Because as you know, every time of year, every time of day, the light does something differently at different times. So this was natural light, and I have people on set that are constantly watching to see what the natural light is doing, and they give a shout out like, it's great over here now, let's go for it. And then the stylists will move in and fix things up. And so that's kind of how we work with interiors. And this is the result.
It's exquisite. I love it.
Thank you.
And now you're still
Yeah.
photographing with the 501c at the time of this campaign, but it was sort of a pivotal point in your career. Could you talk about what happened?
Yeah, this was. So first what happened was I was headed to Paris with my partner. And it's very important that I mentioned, as a commercial photographer, I've done so much of this earlier on in my career alone that I've paired up with my partner and we work together. It makes perfect sense. She's also a fine artist, Parsons graduate, and has an amazing eye. So she's one of the people who will be, I say she's my third and fourth eye. And I have so much respect for her artistry and sensibility that she'll also take part in scouting locations, angles, knowing what the lighting is doing. So before we were headed to Paris we had a show that we were participating in Paris. It was my first time going. And she kept saying to me, you need to have something more than an iPhone. The iPhone's great. We use it for scouting and I love the iPhone, but you know, you need to have something a little more quality so that you have beautiful pictures, you know, not just on an iPhone. So on a whim, I purchased the X1D, and it has been an absolute game changer from the moment just the feeling of it alone is incredible. But the fact that it's medium format and has the most beautiful files. And I've noticed for me, when I shoot at a higher ISO, like 3200, I feel like it's closer to a film feel. I feel like you know, early on, the digital grain wasn't so pretty. It was more like pixels kind of, but I feel like it's evolved and it's got a sophistication that is just really appealing to me. And so I got this camera. We're literally at the airport and I'm calling in to get it insured, to make sure. And it was a game changer from the get-go. We photographed a yacht, and there's no way I would have been able to have a tripod. We were on a dinghy and we were moving around the yacht. And this was Lynn Morgan was the designer, with Brooks and Filotico, the architects, and it was for Cottages and Gardens with DJ Carey, who I'll mention again later because she's amazing. But and I'd say this first job we did with it, about 85% of the shots used were from the X1D and handheld. So
Oh, wow.
so it's been a game changer from the start. And this is with the X1D. So this is the first series of interiors shot with the X1D. And what happened on this set was, it was pivotal. This was really pivotal because if you're a commercial photographer, not only is your gear expensive, but you need to have multiples. You need to have backups. You need to afford as much as you can in terms of additional lenses, an additional computer. And while we were on this shoot, I was having some technical issues, because technology is technology, and issues can happen. It can be quirky. We were having some issues, and not the time to troubleshoot while you're working on a day with a client, and it's needs to be done. You know, you have to get it done and you have to perform. So I was reluctant, because I wanted my X1D to be handheld and just kind of, you know, in my mind, I wanted it just for kind of I don't want to say fun stuff, but yeah, kind of more the fun stuff, the looser stuff. And we ended up putting it on the tripod because we needed to, because it was also a wonderful digital camera. We put it on the tripod, and voila, this is what we got. We were so happy. I was happy that I was able to put it into my kit and really, and it's operationally it's a little different, but
Mhm.
it did the job, and we were so thrilled. And this is Stephen Gambrell, and I can never take my eyes off of his work. I cannot avert my eyes. I love it, and I can look at it all day.
So I have
Yeah,
another
the next for
question.
you. Oh, sure.
Oh, sorry. So just having seen the capabilities of digital photography technology throughout the years, how has your view on photography changed?
Huh. Well, the one thing that I notice is like the iPhone. So a lot of people complain about everybody's a photographer, and of course that does happen.
Mhm.
It's good and it's bad. I think it elevates elevates visuals, and also kind of dumbs it down at exactly the same time. I love seeing what our nieces do, and I love seeing people's eyes. Everybody has a point of view, each and every
Mhm.
one of us. So it's really interesting to see people's eyes and the stories they tell through the pictures they take. I love seeing that on Instagram. It's really inspiring.
Mhm.
And there is a difference, though, between between doing that and being a professional photographer.
Mhm.
It takes years to learn this equipment, and there's a lot to it. There really is a lot to it, and a lot of it is people skills and
Mhm.
interactions with people. And I find the photographers who I admire, who are really, really successful, are usually have excellent people skills as well, and can really relate
Mhm.
to others, and pull things out of them when they're photographing them. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
So we'll just move on to the next slide. This is also the same campaign as the previous slide. And you started using the X1D with this. What does your post-production process look like these days?
Well, so we do bracketing, so we have
Mhm.
various exposures that we can combine. So
Mhm.
this in this shot, there wasn't a lot of layering necessary, with the exception of maybe the window area,
Mhm.
we where I can bring in a little more detail from the window area.
Mhm.
I do like in retouching. It's very personal to me, and
Mhm.
I view it as kind of paint. It's painting with light. So there are things
Mhm.
that I can, just like in the darkroom, I can dodge and burn and dodge, and accentuate certain areas more than others, call attention to certain areas
Mhm.
more than others, and
Okay, so you do all of your like post-processing yourself.
yeah. I mean, if we have to,
Mhm.
if we have if we have more in the studio, if we're in a studio, we'll have a digital tech and someone doing retouching sometimes right on set. But for this kind of
Mhm.
stuff, we pretty much do it all ourselves.
Mhm. Okay. So we'll move on
Yeah.
a
So this is
bit.
one more from that series.
Mhm. Okay, what can you tell us about this image here?
So this is a very special image,
Mhm.
and this is a very good example of our editor-in-chief, DJ Carey of Connecticut Cottages and Gardens, has an impeccable sense of pairing the photographers with the designers or
Mhm.
homeowners or architects. And this is one of those examples. And this is a good example that I want to bring up also to your listeners, that because what I'm going to describe is a way to keep in mind, uh, for them as they're moving through their careers. So she put us on this assignment knowing that we would really fall in love with these guys. This is Colin Robinson and Trent DeBerry of Hound House, Connecticut. And we did. Um,
Mhm.
the day was amazing. Their work is incredible. and they invited us back to spend some time with them. So over the years, we've continued with a creative partnership, and we do, people call it testing, or but we will continue shooting with them, and just as we're feeling it, as we see something. So this was a full day editorial shoot, and where we had to move through a number of shots, and I mean, it was amazing. We fell in love with the work. It's just so beautiful that the guys even let us come back and shoot a little more when we said, oh, there's one space that I would love to capture. And so it just kind of continued like that. And over the years, it's continued like that. So we've gotten to know each other quite well. And the next slide shows some of the personal work that we've done with them. So the one on the right is Nyla the cat, and she was the winner for the XU contest, which introduced.
Yeah, we're so delighted you entered, and now having this artist talk now. So
yeah, thank you. And both of these are handheld with the X1D, and in very low lighting situations, and the X1D handles it beautifully. I couldn't be more happy with the quality.
Yeah, even at the ISO 6400, it beautifully captures all the details and the texture and the different shades of blue, which is, pretty incredible. But how?
Yeah. So and I'll.
Oh, go ahead.
No, sorry, I'm listening.
Oh, it's okay. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so in retouch, we'll bring up certain areas to accentuate maybe the cat, the subject matter, and that sort of thing.
And how?
And this is an example.
Oh, sorry, this is a little.
No, go ahead. How did this?
No, you can finish. You can continue. Go ahead.
No, I'm okay. I'm listening.
Oh no, I was just wondering how something like this would turn into an editorial work, since this was like a personal project for you.
Okay, so this was just personal. We just saw beautiful spaces and objects. One of the things that over my career I've realized that I shoot is product in spaces. So I think I really hone in on the product or the object, and then the gorgeous space around it becomes the backdrop. So as we're continuing to work with Colin and Trent, one of our advertising clients was looking for a backdrop for a shoot, and we were like, we got it. Check this out. So in the next slide, you'll see we used one of the locations as an example to show how the client's product might look. And this client was towels, bedding, window treatments, and home products. And so we did this shot. We presented it to the client with some other shots so they could see the location, and they were so excited about it that they went for it. So this is an example of how you could be put on a shoot, meet a group of people, become friendly with them, and continue documenting their home, their lifestyle, and then it turned into this wonderful advertising campaign, a home advertising campaign that everybody benefited from. The client was happy, our friends were happy, the space was rented out, and we also made a little money too. So it was that's kind of the full story of a situation that can happen and did happen for us, and it was wonderful, and it continues to be wonderful.
Okay, and as we move on, what can you tell us about this image?
So so this is an example. This is Sawyer. This is an example of when you're shooting interiors, one of the things I love is that you might also have the opportunity to photograph the family pets or the children, or still life, so this is an example of we just had to do this. It just had to be done, as you can see. And
Mm-hmm.
I was on the 501c, which again is a boxier camera, and I don't think I was tethered. I think I was shooting and capturing it, on the back. And but I'm down low, and so it's a little trickier camera. It's a special camera, the 501c, and I'm looking down, and so it's not a super fast camera, but we got it. And the client, Julie Curtis is the design director. She had it laid out, and it looked great, but I think it was a little too aggressive for what they were trying to say for the
Mm-hmm.
article, but I've kept it in my portfolio, and I actually switched it to black and white because Colin had switched it to black and white, and I thought it really looked cool. So
It really is
good
a
for
nice
Halloween,
image.
good for every
Yeah.
day.
We have another image of Luna. Um, what can you tell us about this image here?
Yes, she is a superstar, world renowned,
Mhm.
and and she's not afraid to let you know it. So this came about. Our wonderful creative director Mariano Testa he's been an incredible inspiration to us. He really honed in on the way we shoot product, the way I and my partner Bridget, the way we view product and shoot it in situ. And he brought us in on his wonderful team, and this was an
Mhm.
advertising campaign for Ralph Lauren, and
Mhm.
we were shooting the product, we're shooting the pillows. And the team that I was on, we were talking amongst ourselves, and thinking, wouldn't it be great if Luna was part of showcasing the product? It would make
Mhm.
it more interesting and engaging. And um, Mariana was willing to loan her for a few minutes, and Luna was willing. So one of the things that I like to think they're engaging with me, but I think it's the sound that the X1D makes. It's this little clicking sound, and even if there's noise in the room, it's like they hone right in on click
Mhm.
click, and
The
just
ears
really
perking up a little.
focus. The ears perking up. So this is a very near and dear image to us,
Mhm.
and yeah, and it was a wonderful experience as well. And actually Mariano is responsible for, he loves handheld, so he's really
Mhm.
pushed me use the handheld more in photographing product, because
Mhm.
usually throughout my career and with the digital, still life and product is shot more on the tripod, which has been my experience. And so this has been a wonderful transition to shooting more details handheld. It's
Mhm.
got a different feeling, I think, when you're hand holding the
Mhm.
camera. And the other thing I love is just looking through the lens.
Mhm.
That's what I liked also with the 501c, with the phase back, looking in through the lens. The capabilities, of course, have the live video, but I do feel like sometimes that's once removed. Like you're looking at the object and then you're looking at the screen to see
Mhm.
kind of what happened. Whereas
Mhm.
with the X1D and not tethered, it feels more spontaneous, and that
Mhm.
I kind of get what I get, just so long as I know that I got it, and I can check that on the screen just to make sure it's sharp where I want it and everything looks the way I want it. But I love that quality of not being tethered. I've never owned a prior camera that was like a 35 millimeter or DSLR, so this is my
Mhm.
first more compact camera,
Mhm.
and it's been wonderful.
Great. So we'll move on. So is this one of your editorial work as well?
Yeah, so the one on the left is editorial. Again, that was for cottages and gardens,
Mhm.
and this is creative directors John Tutelo and David Kraut, and
Mhm.
this was for a holiday story, and they had this beautiful still life already set up. So it was it just spoke to us, and it had that painterly quality. So we went in, and that was with the 501c. And the one on the right was again with Hound House, handheld X1D, and it was great because the light bulb's up a little high, so I could hold the camera up. I didn't have to step up ladders, and so that was just continuing our creative relationship with them. But I wanted to show kind of the side by side, the still life side by side. And this is also what we might be required to shoot on an interior shoot, which is great because you may find yourself shooting portraits of the designers or the architects or the homeowners, their pets, the still life.
Very cool. And do you, is there a preference when you're shooting with the 501 or with the X1D, or is it just like kind of in the moment?
Well, like I said, the X1D is still somewhat new. I mean, not new enough that we use it all the time, but it's been an interesting. I view the 501C as my tripod camera, and I was viewing the X1D as my handheld camera. But now I'm very happy with the way the X1D is performing on a tripod. But I'm not willing to let go of my 501C. And it's so I think it's kind of what you're feeling. It's very much what you as the creator and you as the photographer and artist, what's comfortable for you to use. So I could see us going back and forth between the two, but I've been really excited about the X1D and its capabilities. It has such diverse capabilities. Even if we have to shoot overhead product overhead, I can be tethered and have the live video. Whereas the X1D, I'd be climbing a ladder and you can't look down because you'd be falling over. So there were some physical aspects of how the cameras differ and how they work.
Okay. And then take a look at some of your portrait series. So what can you tell us about these two?
Sure. So the gentleman on the left is Albert Sack. He is an American icon, a antiques furniture dealer, and he just has had a beautiful face. And we had a day of shooting antiques, and it was for Northeast Auction. My client Ron Bourgeot was gracious enough to allow me to photograph Albert, and hurry up, we have to get to work, but go ahead. And so it was great that he let me do that, because this was one of my very favorite portraits. This was done on the first digital back, that light phase, which was the longer kind of chip. So I'm on a tripod with a 501C, and he had to remain really still because I think the camera goes up to 200, the ISO 200. Whereas the gentleman on the right is our dear friend Bobby Nudd, who is a New Hampshire lobsterman, and we were able to handhold. We had a day of shooting on a lobster boat, and that never would have been. I never would take the 501C with a computer, with a tripod. It's just not really possible. As you can imagine. Waves are splashing, the boat's moving around, and it was quite the experience, which is also what the X1D is. It's almost like full circle. It's opened me up to be able to shoot what I loved shooting at the beginning of my career, which is more people and what people do. So we have a section on my website called A Day in the Life, and this is where we had a day on the lobster boat, and you can see that imagery on there. And Bridget is great because she actually scouted the area. I may be very focused on some technical things, but she can look around, scout the area. She found this great location and was able to say to Bobby Nudd, come on, we got to get your portrait. And I was a little more like, leave him alone. He's got to get the lobster off the boat. And but no, that's just kind of how we work together, and that's this is the result, and we were really excited. He doesn't like to be photographed so much, so he was a good sport. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Then we'll move on to, this is
Sure.
Leon. Hmm.
Liang Ong is another
Hmm.
fashion designer and
Hmm.
an amazing, he has an amazing face. This was for an editorial story, and another example of when you might be photographing the homeowners. And so the light was just beautiful. It was the end of the day, and he was willing to sit for us. And this is the result. This is on the 501c. And as you can see, I see it's with the 80 millimeter. That's kind of been my go-to for the 501c. I love the 80. Um,
Hmm. It's great composition.
Thanks.
Okay. And this is our last image, unfortunately. This is Zaina.
Yep, Zena Sakow is a streetwear
Mhm.
designer, and this is shot
Mhm.
at the iconic Jane Ive studio in Soho in New York City.
Mhm.
And one of the things I love about this is it really shows how I like to frame up an interior space and then have a
Mhm.
person in that space. Am I love this image, and this was with the X1D handheld,
Mhm.
and yeah, I feel very fortunate that I still, after all these years, love what I do, and feel like I'm just getting better and better, and that's what I'm trying to do. I love to learn from all of you guys at Hasselblad. I love your webinars, and I just keep listening and learning and meeting new people.
Oh, absolutely. And I have a question here. Artistically, what kind of goals do you have in mind when you're photographing people?
Huh. I think to really capture something about them, a sense of them. And I also really
Mhm.
want to make sure everything is in place technically. Like I love that I don't know, for me this shot has everything balanced exactly where I want it to be. So, and I try to do that
Mhm.
in camera. I try to capture in camera so that I don't think there was any cropping on this one.
Mhm.
But yeah, I like to do full frame and engaged with me with the camera, and the X1D makes it easier to photograph people, to not have to be on a tripod. Like I said, when we would be shooting a day of interiors and then need to photograph the homeowner or architects or designers, I would almost be kind of like, oh gosh, I'm tired, and then to have to move around on a tripod still. The X1D has made this a very joyous experience. It's like, okay, no problem, let's do the portraits. We could do it any time of day. I feel like it's refreshed um, my love of photographing people,
Mhm.
because it has an ease about it, and that's really important.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. So, and so that was the last image. And before we jump into all the listener questions, just to recap, this is a list of the products you use. And we have some questions already. What would you say is your go-to lens for portraits versus, your interior spaces?
Okay, so for interior spaces, obviously we tend to use more wide angle. So I've got a 40 for the 501c. I've got a 40. I've got a 50. For the X1D, we just purchased a 30. That, thank God we did, because the client was really interested in seeing more space for his particular needs. Um, and so that's been a wonderful. I want to try to stay away from that fisheye, kind of where the edges start bending.
Hmm.
And we do tweak that in Photoshop. I know some people
Okay.
don't like that so much, but
Hmm.
we find it has worked for us.
Hmm.
Um, And so yeah, I would say for interiors, it would be the 40 or the 50. And on the 501c, it was definitely the 80. I just love the 80 lens on the
Mhm.
501c. The X1D I'm still experimenting with. So I think for portraits, I'm kind of loving the 90.
Mhm.
I'm interested in the 80 for the X1D. I've played around a little with it, and it's a beautiful
Mhm.
lens. It's very heavy, and it's a little pricey, but you got to have
Mhm.
what you got to have. So yeah, I would say the 90 and 45. I haven't had much experience yet with the 135,
Mhm.
but I will be playing with that too.
Okay. Okay, so let's just fire off some questions, more questions from the audience here.
Now I'm
Okay,
afraid.
so no, they're all very supportive. Um, so we have a question from Luca asking, saying, I see that you prefer vertical framing. Is that the only is that a request of the editors, or is that part of your style?
Okay, so for editorial, I would say a lot of it is definitely vertical for the page layout. And for web, we have been shooting more horizontally because interiors also can be really beautiful. Obviously, horizontally, you're going to capture more of the room, more of the space.
Hmm.
The problem with that is that it has to be laid out. Either it'll be small for one page, or it'll be like a two-page spread, which is really beautiful.
Hmm.
Um, but for portraiture, I like shooting vertically, and but I try to shake it up. That's an interesting question because I wasn't even aware of which ones I kind of I didn't choose according to horizontal or vertical
Okay.
for this.
Okay. What advice would you offer someone considering this career in commercial photography?
I think one of the things that I missed out on for my career was assisting a New York City photographer. So, being in San Francisco, I worked with photographers at the auction house. We started actually in the dark room, developing the black and white film that the photographers were shooting. So that's kind of how I started. And then I would work with the photographers, assisting the photographers. I feel like if you want to be in New York City, then then you definitely want to. I would work with assisting photographers in New York City or in the town or area that you're located in. I would look to the photographers whose work you really respect, and approach him or her to see if they have any work available with them. Yeah,
I think a
that's
lot of
one thing
people are
that's
going to reach
that's
out.
interesting because you do get to learn who the people are and the players are within your area. And so yeah, by the time I came to New York, I had already kind of done all of that, but in San Francisco. So
Okay.
yeah,
I think a lot of people are going to reach out to you after this webinar.
feel free. I'm happy to. I like to get to know other photographers.
So I have one from Melker. Thanks for showing this great work. How has your work with interiors changed your way of working with portraiture?
I think I'm more aware of the interior space. Definitely. That's also a good question. I remember we were hired to shoot portraits for a colleague, and she loved it because Bridget and I were paying attention to everything that was going on around the subject matter, not just the portrait. And
Mhm.
and that was a really good thing. So I think it's honed in on what's happening in the surrounding area around the portrait.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Another question regarding portraits again. How much directing do you do when you photograph people?
Usually I like to get the first few frames just right off the cuff. And even if they're not even engaging with the camera or looking at the camera, for me, I find that, and this is why I used to always be so afraid of those, those clip tests, the snip tests that you would do when you were developing your film, because 9 times out of 10, that very first frame was like amazing for me. And then they become more studied. So what I'll do is I'll get them really, some shots really quickly, and then I'll start directing. And I also like when they direct themselves and they start feeling, I like the subject to feel comfortable, and then they start kind of directing themselves. And then there's a point where the fatigue is okay, it's done. But I don't tend to spend all day. Not only is their time is a limit, for me and for the sitter, sometimes you're allowed 15 minutes, sometimes you can explore longer, but sometimes it's 5 minutes or less. So, you got to be quick to get it and ready to get it.
Definitely. Question from Charles. So what projects, parentheses, be wild, would you like to do outside of your current portfolio, and with what gear?
Well, some of that maybe I can't answer, but no, I'm kidding. I Perhaps I would like to go to South Africa and photograph, some of the wildlife with some friends there, and and really explore a different part of the world. That's one of the wonderful things about photography, is that it can bring you into worlds that are previously unknown to you. And it's a great way of exploration. So I've seen some beautiful work done by my friends in South Africa, and would like to join them on safari, and they have places that they can take us. So once things start opening up, that's a big one. Other than that, just continuing the work of portraiture of my family, friends, people who I find intriguing in what they do and the way they experience life, and and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay. A little bit of a technical question from Marek. How did you deal with perspective control?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier that what I try to get it as close as I possibly can. So you're reminding me that I actually did use the digital back on a 4x5 also, which is obvious, and a 6.7. I think I had a 6.7, but those cameras have the tilts and swings, whereas
Yeah.
these cameras don't. And I've never worked with. I'm actually curious about one of the Hasselblad products where it's the lens that can do the tilts and shifts, or there's some sort of. I haven't explored any of that yet. So I'll tweak it in Photoshop. I will tweak it in Photoshop, but it's usually very minimal. I try to keep it minimal manipulation with the files in that way. But that's how I deal with that. And I know the software also has some ability to help with that perspective.
Mhm. Yes. And I don't know if we spoke about this. Ramona is asking, do you generally shoot tethered?
So for the interior work, I do shoot tethered. It really helps the stylists be able to see their work, and we can really hone in and see what's going on stylistically. That's probably the biggest thing. The great thing with the X1D that I noticed is we had a really intense day on a shoot, where the first floor was a lot. There was a lot to be photographed. So by the end of the shoot, we only had a few rooms in the upstairs portion, and because of time, the lighting, and just simply fatigue, I was able to shoot with the X1D on a tripod, not tethered. So that was a lovely discovery with the X1D, that I could actually do that. have images that are just as beautifully composed and lit. But we tend to shoot absolutely tethered for interiors to a computer, to a Mac.
Okay. Oh my gosh, we have so many questions with so little time. Paul is asking, do you print your images? And if so, what are your favorite sizes?
Oh, so I do love to print, especially portraiture, because people want to see themselves, and if it's done beautifully, it's wonderful, and it's nice when they're happy. But I also do print in some interiors as well, because those have been gifts, and people have hung them on their walls. I use an Epson printer, and I kind of love seeing it big. So the biggest that my printer goes up to is 13 by 19. 13 by 19. So it's fun to see things blown up big. We had a job for the Cooper Hewitt once, and they blew up because they were working on one of the rooms at the one of their no actually it was the New York Yacht Club, sorry. They had one of their rooms closed off for restoration, and what they decided to do was blow up one of the interior images so huge that it was, you know, practically life size, and they had it in front of the, oh my God, that was so exciting to see, because, you know, as photographers, we don't usually get to see our work blown up that large. And I was so impressed with the quality, and also, you know, a lot of what we do nowadays is for web, which to see things in print is really exciting. And so to see that huge was, I mean, we were blown away, and they did such an incredible job in printing it. So yeah, so that's exciting.
Great. Okay, just one more question. You also have a portfolio of stock imagery. Is this a side project, or do you actively pursue expanding this side of the business?
Yeah, this is an area that I've been somewhat negligent in, and I definitely need to get more educated and aware of somehow incorporating Getty images or some other outlet in terms of selling some past work. Some of my interior designers have asked for, you know, do you do, well, some of them are in the back there. That was a cocktail series. And but yeah, so I mean, it's funny because I actually hid that, and then someone needed to see that section, so I opened it back up so that they could, because they are an interior designer and they're doing a project, and they may need to purchase some artwork for the walls, and hopefully they come to us. So yeah, I need to actually tidy up that section, and yeah,
Okay.
and be more aware of it moving forward as well.
Okay. Thank you. There's so many questions, but we're 5 minutes past our time, so unfortunately we have to come to the end. I don't know if you had any last thoughts, Ellen.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been quite the honor, and I look forward to more continued work with Hasselblad products. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us today, and hopefully we can meet in person soon. So
I look forward to that.
Yes, definitely. To see more of Ellen's work, you can follow her on Instagram at Ellen McDermott NYC, and her website, ellenmcdermott.com. And for anything Hasselblad, if you don't follow us yet, we're at Hasselblad on all social channels, and encourage you to check out our other online webinars available at hasselblad.com/events, including a special Hasselblad Masters panel webinar tomorrow featuring 4 previous Masters winners. This webinar is a must-watch for anyone planning on entering the Hasselblad Masters 2021 competition, with the opportunity to ask the panelists questions as part of the live presentation. Hope you tune in. And one last note, there will be a survey at the end of the webinar. We would love to hear your feedback on future webinars and hope you'll join us for the next one. Thank you again for joining us and stay safe out there.